The email arrived on an ordinary Tuesday. Dinner at Richard's house this Saturday. Just a few of us. Nothing formal. Coming from any other CEO, this would have been just a social invitation. But after 22 years at CoreLogic Dynamics, I knew how to read between the lines. The company I had helped transform from a chaotic startup into a $120 million corporation was changing. In recent weeks, my opinions were being subtly ignored in meetings. My access to strategic documents had diminished. Projects that would normally have passed through me were being routed to other directors. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to access more stories like this. As I put my laptop in my bag that afternoon, I passed Richard's office and caught him on a video conference with Elizabeth, the board chair. When he saw me through the slightly open door, he quickly closed his computer screen. A tense smile spread across his face. "Nancy, did you get my invitation?" "Yes, I'll be there on Saturday."
Great.
"Jennifer is looking forward to seeing you." And he hesitated. "Brooke will be home too."
Brooke.
The 26-year-old daughter who had just finished her MBA. The same one who had appeared in the office 3 times in the past few months to observe how the family business works. In the elevator, a familiar feeling took over me. The same one I felt when I had to fire 30 employees during the 2008 crisis. The same feeling as when we completely revamped our platform in 2015, betting on a technology that only Richard and I believed in. The intuition that had kept me alive in this corporate world for so long was screaming. Something big was about to happen, and I was the last to know. The Thompson house had always impressed me. Not for the showiness, but for its authenticity. Richard had never been the type to spend money just to impress. Our connection was always genuine, built on nights working late, facing crises, and celebrating modest victories that, over time, brought us to where we are. Jennifer greeted me with a warm hug, but there was something different in her look.
Pity?
Guilt? "Nancy, it's so good to see you out of the office. Come on, Brooke is eager to talk with you." In the dining room, Brooke Thompson was seated next to the place traditionally reserved for me. Perfectly styled hair, an impeccable blazer, an air like someone fresh out of an executive leadership catalog. "Nancy, the legend herself," Brooke exclaimed with exaggerated enthusiasm. "I'm soaking up everything I can from your experience. It must be fascinating to have seen all the technological evolution since the dawn of commercial internet, right?" I smiled politely. The dinner went on with superficial conversation until Richard cleared his throat while holding his wine glass. "Nancy, you have been the backbone of CoreLogic since we were just 3 people in a rented room. Without you, we wouldn't be where we are." My stomach sank. Speeches of gratitude are often preludes to difficult news. The reason for this dinner is to share a strategic decision. Teknova has shown interest in acquiring CoreLogic. To maximize our value, we need to show an innovative, forward-looking leadership structure. Richard took a deep breath. Brooke has agreed to take on the role of Director of Operations and Strategy. Starting next week, you will report directly to her. Brooke smiled, placing her hand on mine.
Don't worry, Grandma.
I'm going to need all your experience to understand the old systems. Your institutional knowledge is valuable during this transition.
Grandma.
At 48 years old, I drove home on autopilot, Richard's words and Brooke's condescending smile repeating in my mind. 22 years. Countless sacrificed weekends. Canceled vacations. Relationships that didn't survive my 70-hour work weeks dedicated to CoreLogic. At home, I opened the bottom drawer of my office. The blue folder, a little dusty, contained documents I hadn't reviewed in years. Among them, a contract signed in 2005 when the company faced financial difficulties. "We can't give you the raise you deserve this year, Nancy," Richard had said. "But I want you to have something more valuable in the long run." 5% of the company's shares. At the time, a symbolic gesture that was barely worth a few $1,000s. Today, about $6 million. More importantly, voting rights in board decisions and specific clauses regarding the intellectual property of the systems I developed. I could have exploded everything at that moment. Sent an email, made a phone call, But 2 decades in the corporate world had taught me that timing is everything. Richard had clearly forgotten that detail. Or maybe he assumed I had forgotten as well. Nancy, the outdated one. Nancy, Grandma. Nancy, the relic of the past, I murmured as I dialed Amanda's number, an intellectual property attorney I met at a conference. They can't just discard you like that, Amanda stated, reviewing the documents in her office on Monday. These clauses are clear about your intellectual property rights. And with 5% of the shares, you have the standing to question strategic decisions. I don't want an open war, Amanda. I just want fair recognition. In the following days, I implemented my strategy meticulously. First, I documented every system I had created or refined, especially those vital to our biggest clients. I cataloged every improvement, every personalized solution that only I fully understood. At the company, I maintained a facade of cooperation. I attended meetings with Brooke, answered her superficial questions, and tolerated her condescension when she explained basic concepts as if they were revelations. It's amazing how you kept everything running with such traditional tools, Brooke commented during a presentation, provoking laughs from her newly hired digital transformation consultants. At night, I worked on my plan B. I organized a discreet meeting with Michael Wilson, CEO of Technova, who was supposedly interested in acquiring CoreLogic. To be frank, Nancy, we're more interested in the knowledge and the systems than in the brand, Michael revealed over coffee. Speaking as a professional to a professional, how vital do you consider your role in transitioning the core systems? Without me, you'd be buying a pretty car without an engine, I answered honestly. The critical systems serving our 5 biggest clients were customized by me over the years. 3 weeks after the dinner, Brooke's changes began to take effect, none of them positive. Her first major initiative was to migrate our data management system to a more modern platform, ignoring my warnings about incompatibilities with critical legacy systems. On Thursday morning, Kevin, our data engineer, walked into my pale office. We lost access to MediTrust's historical data. 3 years of predictive analytics just vanished during the migration. MediTrust, our second largest client, a pharmaceutical company that depended on our analytics for clinical trials. Does Brooke know? Yes, but she said it's just a temporary modernization obstacle. She asked us not to inform the client yet. That afternoon, Sarah from the operations team discreetly approached me in the cafeteria. Nancy, I'm worried. The new procedures are causing significant delays. 3 clients have already sent emails questioning inconsistencies in their reports. The tension in the hallways was palpable. Veteran employees exchanged worried glances. Brooke's new hires, freshly graduated from expensive MBA programs, were creating impressive presentations that ignored the operational reality of the company. In a general meeting, Brooke presented her vision of necessary disruption. Changes cause discomfort, but we are abandoning outdated systems to enter the new era of CoreLogic. I appreciate everyone's patience, especially those long-serving employees who need to adapt to new methods. Her gaze briefly met mine. I smiled and nodded, while my phone vibrated with a message from Elizabeth, the board chair. Nancy, we need to talk. Some board members are worried about the recent developments. Can we meet discreetly? It was time to show my cards. Elizabeth's office was on the 20th floor of a downtown office building, away from the prying eyes at CoreLogic. Her gray hair and elegant demeanor always commanded my respect. When we first met 15 years ago, she was the only woman on the board. Today, at 62, she ran meetings with the same firmness she displayed when reprimanding arrogant executives who underestimated her intelligence. The situation is complicated, Nancy, Elizabeth began, offering me some tea. Richard put a lot of political capital into this transition. He convinced several board members that a young and disruptive leadership would increase our market value before the acquisition. And now these same members are worried, I added, accepting the cup.
Exactly.
3 clients have sent formal communications. MediTrust is threatening to invoke contractual clauses for service failures. This could cost millions. I placed my folder on the table and slid the 2005 contract toward her. Elizabeth adjusted her glasses, studying the document for several minutes. Her expression gradually shifted from concentration to surprise. 5%? With voting rights and intellectual property protections? Richard never mentioned that in the board discussions. I believe he forgot, I replied calmly. Or maybe he thought it was insignificant. Elizabeth took off her glasses, leaning back in her chair. What do you intend to do about that? I'm not seeking revenge, Elizabeth. I just want fair recognition of my work and to preserve what we built. I have a plan, but I need allies. I explained my strategy. Elizabeth listened intently, asking occasional questions. When I finished, she nodded. I'll speak discreetly with some board members. In the meantime, continue documenting everything. My next alliance required even more caution. Kevin, our data engineer, was 32 years old and had an exceptional talent for complex systems. Hired by me 5 years ago, he understood CoreLogic's architecture better than any other engineer. I'm so frustrated, Kevin confessed when we met at a cafe away from the office. The new system that Brooke implemented may look impressive on the surface, but it completely ignores the real needs of the clients. How long until this causes major problems? It's already happening. I'm fixing bugs behind the scenes that nobody notices. Last week, I avoided a catastrophic failure in Global Health's system purely by luck. If I hadn't noticed an inconsistency, Global Health is our biggest client. Exactly. And none of the new digital transformation teams seemed to understand the gravity of this. I explained to Kevin selected parts of my plan, asking for his help to technically document the vulnerabilities created by Brooke's changes, without any sabotage or bad faith. Just the objective facts. Count on me, he assured. Most of the technical team is as worried as I am. Sarah, our operations director, was my third crucial ally. With 15 years at the company, she managed relationships with major clients and understood their specific needs. Clients are calling me directly, Sarah explained during our lunch. They ignore the new account managers that Brooke hired. Yesterday, Meditrust technology director asked me directly if we were slowly trying to kill them. What does Brooke say about that? That they are resistant to change and that we need to educate the clients about innovation. Nancy, we're talking about companies that lead their sectors in technology. They don't need lessons in innovation from someone who just graduated college. With my alliances established, I needed one last strategic partner, Michael Wilson from Technova. Our second meeting took place in his office after I sent a detailed analysis of CoreLogic's current situation. Your assessment is concerning, Nancy, Michael commented as he reviewed the documents. We're considering a significant investment, and operational stability is critical. CoreLogic still has exceptional systems and valuable talent. The problem is the current transition. And what would be the ideal solution in your view? A gradual and well-planned transition, not an abrupt rupture that ignores institutional knowledge. Critical systems require care, not enthusiastic demolition. Michael studied my face for a moment. Would you be willing to lead this transition if the acquisition goes through? Under the right conditions, yes. My goal has always been to preserve what we built. Interesting. We have a board meeting at CoreLogic next week. I believe this conversation will be extremely relevant. When I left Technova's building, I received a message from Elizabeth. Emergency board meeting scheduled for Friday. Richard isn't happy. Be prepared. My plan was entering its decisive phase. The week before the board meeting turned into a corporate nightmare that even my years of experience couldn't have anticipated. Brooke's modernization initiatives, implemented without proper testing, started to crumble like a house of cards. It all began on Monday with a failure in Global Health's integrated system. The predictive algorithms we developed to help with early diagnosis of heart diseases showed serious inconsistencies after the migration to the new system. We're getting completely different results with the same input data, explained Global Health's medical director during an emergency video conference. This is unacceptable in medical applications. Lives depend on it. Brooke tried to calm the situation with empty promises and technical jargon that she clearly didn't understand. They are just necessary adjustments during the implementation period. The enhanced artificial intelligence requires time for calibration. The problem? There was no artificial intelligence in the system. Only carefully developed and tested algorithms over the years, now damaged by the rushed migration. On Tuesday, Meditrust sent a formal notice threatening to terminate its 7-digit contract if the issues with their clinical data were not immediately resolved. 3 other smaller clients followed suit on Wednesday. Kevin spent sleepless nights trying to recover critical data, while Sarah dealt with increasingly angry clients. Brooke, however, maintained her unshakable posture, blaming resistance to change and outdated infrastructure for the problems. "We need to move forward. We can't get stuck with antiquated systems," she declared in an emergency meeting while the technical experts exchanged incredulous looks. The situation reached its peak on Thursday when a processing error caused an accidental refund of $2.3 million to a pharmaceutical client. The security system I had implemented to prevent exactly this type of error had been disabled during the upgrade. Richard finally realized the gravity of the situation when our CFO panicked in his office. I saw the two of them through the glass walls, gesturing intensely. Richard kept running his fingers through his gray hair repeatedly, his classic gesture in extreme stress. Minutes later, I received a call from him. "Nancy, we need your help."
Urgent.
"Of course, Richard. How can I help?" I replied calmly, as if I wasn't following the disaster unfolding over the past few days. "The payment system. Is there anything we can do immediately? I can restore the original security protocol and implement a temporary fix. But I'll need full access to the system. Do whatever is necessary. I already authorized it." I worked with Kevin and 2 other engineers until 3 in the morning, reversing the most harmful changes and stabilizing the critical systems. Brooke's team was visibly absent. None of them had enough knowledge to help in a real crisis. On Friday morning, the day of the board meeting, I received a revealing email from Global Health. Apparently, Brooke had tried to hide the gravity of the situation, suggesting that the data issues were the client's fault. The medical director was forwarding the correspondence to me, asking for clarification. I printed the email and added it to my folder, along with detailed reports of the week's incidents, technical documentation of the failures, and a financial analysis of the potential impact. When I entered the meeting room at 10 a.m., Elizabeth was already positioned at the head of the table. Richard looked as if he had aged 5 years in 1 week. Brooke maintained a forced smile, although her eyes betrayed nervousness. Michael Wilson from Technova had been invited as an observer, sitting discreetly in the corner of the room. "Let's begin," announced Elizabeth, her firm voice cutting through the palpable tension in the room. "We have a critical situation to discuss." The core logic meeting room had always seemed imposing to me, with its massive wooden table and panoramic view of the city. That day, however, the tension made the environment almost claustrophobic. The 9 board members, normally relaxed and sociable before meetings, wore grave expressions. Elizabeth opened the session with brutal objectivity. "In the last 3 weeks, we have lost 18% of our market value. 4 key clients are threatening to cancel contracts that represent 30% of our annual revenue. Yesterday's payment incident could lead to significant regulatory problems. We need to understand exactly what is happening." Richard cleared his throat, trying to take control of the narrative. "We are going through an ambitious technological transition which naturally presents temporary challenges. Brooke can better explain our strategic vision." Brooke stood up, immaculate in her navy suit, and began a presentation on digital transformation and necessary disruption. Her colorful slides were full of out-of-context graphs and motivational phrases about innovation. "We are breaking outdated paradigms," she declared with rehearsed enthusiasm. "The current pain is the price of progress. In 6 months, we will have completely renewed systems that—" "Excuse me," Elizabeth interrupted, "but could you specifically explain why Global Health's system is showing inconsistent results that could compromise medical diagnoses?" Brooke hesitated. "Well, we are recalibrating algorithms for future precision." "And the lost data from Meditrust?" asked another board member. "An unfortunate sacrifice necessary to implement more efficient structures." Michael Wilson, who had been silent until now, leaned forward. Excuse me, but as a potential investor, I need to know, were these sacrifices communicated to the clients before implementation? Silence, answered Brooke. Elizabeth turned to me. Nancy, you managed to stabilize the payment system last night. Could you share your analysis of the current situation? I methodically opened my folder, distributing copies of a succinct report I had prepared. The problems we are facing are not just growing pains. They are direct consequences of decisions made without adequately understanding the existing systems. I kept my voice calm and factual. This report details 5 critical failures in the recent updates, all predictable and preventable with proper testing. I explained each problem technically, translating complex concepts into terms the board could understand. I demonstrated how the changes ignored critical dependencies between systems that had been carefully built over the years. What's most concerning is not the errors themselves, but the lack of understanding of their gravity, I concluded. When Global Health reported inconsistencies that could affect medical diagnoses, the response was not to address the problem, but to try to shift the blame to the client. I then slid the printed email to the center of a table. Richard picked it up, his face paling as he read. This can't be true, he mumbled, passing the document to Brooke, who looked increasingly uncomfortable. We keep hearing about outdated systems that need to be replaced, I continued, but these systems process billions of dollars in transactions every year with 99.98% documented accuracy. They were developed iteratively, with continuous improvements based on the real needs of the clients, not theoretical trends. I then opened a separate folder and pulled out my 2005 contract. As a shareholder with 5% of the company and specific rights over several critical intellectual property systems, I feel compelled to formally express my concern with the current direction. The impact was immediate. Richard straightened up in his chair, clearly surprised. Some board members exchanged confused glances. 5%, one of them asked, looking at Richard. An old agreement, Richard murmured, visibly uncomfortable. From when we couldn't offer adequate compensation. Elizabeth, who was already aware of this fact, took the floor. This puts us in a delicate situation. Nancy is not just a senior employee, but a significant shareholder with specific rights over essential intellectual property. Michael Wilson cleared his throat. If I may comment, Teknova is interested in CoreLogic mainly for its proprietary systems and institutional knowledge. Our evaluation assumes operational stability and the maintenance of key client relationships. He looked directly at Richard. Frankly, the recent developments are extremely concerning. We are not interested in acquiring a company in crisis with dissatisfied clients and compromised systems. Silence filled the room. Years of work, millions in market value, and the future of the company I helped build from scratch seemed to hang in the balance. Richard finally broke the silence, his voice softer than usual. Nancy has always been essential to this company. Perhaps we underestimated the complexity of the transition. Elizabeth nodded. We need an immediate solution. Suggestions? That's when Michael Wilson made the proposal that would change everything. Teknova remains interested in acquiring CoreLogic, but under adjusted conditions. We propose a transition led by Nancy, with Richard in an advisory role. And he paused significantly, a reconsideration of the current operational leadership structure. All eyes turned to Brooke, who seemed completely stunned. The silence following Michael Wilson's proposal was deafening. Brooke looked at her father with a pleading expression, while Richard seemed torn between his family loyalty and the business reality at hand. Elizabeth took the initiative, her voice carefully neutral. Let's consider this proposal pragmatically. Our priority is the stability of the company and preserving value for all shareholders. Richard took a deep breath before speaking. I spent the last 22 years building this company. Every decision I made was with its growth and legacy in mind. He glanced briefly at Brooke before continuing, including recent decisions that I now recognize may have been hasty. Brooke interrupted, her voice trembling with indignation. Dad, we can't just abandon our vision because some clients resist change. Every transformation faces initial resistance. We just need more time to. It's not about resistance to change. I cut in. keeping my voice calm. Global health uses more advanced technologies in many areas. The issue is not innovation versus tradition, but responsible implementation versus a disruptive approach. Michael Wilson nodded.
Exactly.
Our analysis shows that CoreLogic systems are remarkably robust and adaptable, the result of years of continuous refinement. The problem lies in the approach to the transition, not in the need for evolution. One of the oldest board members, who had been silent until now, cleared his throat. Richard, we built this company valuing long-term relationships, both with clients and employees. If Teknova sees value in that philosophy, and if Nancy represents the continuity of those principles, maybe we should reconsider our approach. The debate went on for almost 2 hours. Gradually, a consensus formed. CoreLogic needed immediate stability to preserve client relationships and make the acquisition feasible on favorable terms. This meant a change in operational leadership. Elizabeth finally formalized the decision. The board proposes the following. Nancy will assume the leadership of the transition team, working directly with Teknova to ensure the successful integration of the systems. Richard will remain as honorary president in an advisory capacity. Brooke, she hesitated briefly, will be reassigned to an executive development role with appropriate mentoring before taking on operational responsibilities. Brooke's expression wavered between disbelief and humiliation. Richard looked exhausted, but finally he nodded. I accept the board's decision. Nancy has always been fundamental to our operation, and I recognize that we underestimated many things. Michael Wilson appeared satisfied. With this structure, Teknova is prepared to proceed with the acquisition as planned, subject to final due diligence. When the meeting ended, I stayed in the room while the others left. Richard was the last to rise, suddenly looking older and smaller. I really forgot, he said, almost to himself. That 5%. It was so long ago. It's not just about the shares, Richard. You forgot much more than that. He slowly nodded. 22 years. You were there when we nearly went bankrupt in 2008. When we redesigned the entire platform. When his voice trailed off. When Jennifer got sick and you had to be away for 3 months, I finished. I managed everything while you took care of her. And now I'm handing over the company we built to someone else, he murmured. It's not just your company, Richard. It never was. It's our creation from the entire team that built every component, every relationship. He finally looked me in the eye, and I saw genuine recognition. You have always been the soul of CoreLogic, Nancy. I just didn't want to admit it. When I left the meeting room, Kevin and Sarah were waiting anxiously in the corridor. The smile on my face was enough response. There was still a lot of work ahead to stabilize the systems and rebuild client trust, but now we had the chance to do it right. As we walked toward my office, I saw Brooke packing up her office, putting her belongings in a box. Our eyes met briefly. There was no pleasure in seeing her like that, only the certainty that competence and experience still mattered, even in a world obsessed with youth and flashy innovation. Let's start with the global health system. I instructed my team. We've got a medical diagnosis that needs fixing. 6 months can change everything. The CoreLogic office, now officially a subsidiary of Teknova, had a different energy. The glass walls were the same, but the environment had transformed, more collaborative, less hierarchical. From the window of my new office, I watched the sunset paint the horizon of the city. My desk, unlike the old one, was practically empty. A laptop, a pen, and a small cactus that Sarah had given me as a late promotion gift. The integration with Teknova was progressing remarkably well. Michael Wilson kept his promise to preserve what worked while improving areas that really needed modernization. Unlike Brooke's approach, every change was carefully planned, tested, and implemented with the active participation of the teams who knew the systems inside out. The door opened and Kevin entered with a satisfied smile. The final migration for global health is complete. All indicators are green. Data accuracy is 99.99%. They just sent an official statement praising the transition. Excellent work. How is the new team adapting? Surprisingly well. That engineer you hired, Melissa, has a natural talent for understanding the architecture. She's already leading the next integration project. I smiled, thinking about how I had carefully selected and mentored the new generation of technical leaders over the past months. People chosen not just for their academic credentials, but for their ability to understand complex systems and value institutional knowledge. And MediTrust? They renewed the contract for another 5 years, with a 20% higher value. Apparently, our competitors are facing exactly the same type of problems we almost had. Kevin hesitated before continuing. I heard that Brooke is working on a startup now. Something related to innovation consulting. I hope she learned from the experience here. You're more generous than I would be, Kevin laughed, before saying goodbye to get back to work. Once alone again, I opened my email to check the latest messages before calling it a day. Among the routine notifications, an email from Elizabeth caught my attention. Subject: Reflections from a board chair. Nancy. Today we officially signed the final acquisition documents. Technova paid 15% above the initial valuation, largely due to the flawless transition you led. Your 5% yielded more than anyone could have imagined back in 2005. Well deserved. More important than the financial aspect, I want to acknowledge what you have demonstrated in the past few months. Leadership is not about titles, age, or recent diplomas. It's about vision, competence, and the ability to build systems and relationships that last. Richard is slowly accepting that his vision for CoreLogic will not come to fruition through Brooke, but through the legacy of systems and practices you helped establish. He asked me to convey his recognition, which is still hard for him to express in person. In my 30 years in the corporate world, I have rarely seen someone show as much dignity in the face of being undervalued as you did. While many would have reacted with justified anger or immediate departure, you chose a more difficult and infinitely more impactful path. Today, as I watch CoreLogic thrive under your guidance, I see a lesson that many companies need to learn. Deep knowledge is not obsolete in a digital world. It's more valuable than ever. Thank you for this demonstration of true leadership. Elizabeth. I closed the laptop and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. The view of the city was now dotted with lights as the day gave way to night. My phone buzzed with a message from Michael Wilson. We've approved your hybrid work model. 3 remote days a week, as requested. And yes, your new salary is triple your previous one. I smiled as I thought of the little lakeside cabin I had bought with part of the money from my shares. After more than 2 decades almost exclusively dedicated to work, I had finally learned to appreciate balance. In the parking lot, I found Sarah waiting by her car. Ready for our private celebration? She asked, holding up a bottle of champagne. More than ready. As we drove away from CoreLogic, I reflected on the irony of it all. The dinner that was supposed to mark my obsolescence ended up catalyzing my recognition. The attempts to replace me revealed just how irreplaceable I truly was. You know what's funniest? I said to Sarah as we entered our favorite restaurant. In the end, I wasn't even excited about going to that dinner. Sarah laughed, raising her glass in a toast. To the dinner that changed everything. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like to access more stories like this. No, I corrected, thinking of every line of code I had written, every system I designed, every relationship I built over 22 years. To the details that really matter. Our laughter echoed throughout the restaurant as we toasted to the future, one that I had helped build and could finally enjoy on my own terms. The next morning, as I opened my laptop to work remotely from my lakeside cabin, with the sound of water as a soundtrack, I realized that true power was never in titles or positions, but in knowledge that no one can take from you and in the value that only you can create. And that, perhaps, was the most valuable lesson of all.